Alrighty, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Killer Kaiju podcast. Today we have surpassed the 20 mark and are hitting our 21st episode. And this is an extremely special podcast that we're doing today, because as always, it's I, Lucas, and Josh.
Hey, how's it going?
But we also have a special guest with us today. We are joined by a friend of ours named Taylor. Say hi, man.
You're kind of hyping me up a bit much, but thank you. I
Well,
appreciate it.
we'll explain why it's so cool that we're having Taylor on today is because this is the first time we've had a guest on the podcast who actually likes and watches Godzilla films before the podcast. Most of the guests we have on are usually from Josh's angles, which is honestly the main reason we love doing this podcast. Is it's not very often you get to watch someone's first impression of a Godzilla film because most people either are completely negative about it or just don't want to watch them at all. So that's why it's really cool to have that angle for our guests. But today it's going to be really fun because we got two actual kaiju fans in the podcast today. So we'll actually have some good fun facts to talk about for y'all. So before we start, today we are doing Godzilla and Mothra, The Battle for Earth, which is the second Godzilla versus Mothra movie, the first one being in the Heisei series. Japan, it had the same name, so it gets confused a little bit, but this is the one from the Heisei series, 1992. And the American title is Godzilla and Mothra, The Battle for Earth. So without further ado, folks, this is a commentary / podcast. So you can listen to this normally as a podcast or watch along with the timestamps provided on the video or our personal countdown. And you can listen to our kind of ramblings, reviews, and fun facts as we go through the film. We don't have a lot. We do have a lot to talk about going into this movie. So we'll pretty much launch the movie and then we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty about why we love kaiju so much. So with that being said, folks, we are watching the American cut of the movie. The Japanese cut only differs for 2 minutes, and most of it is external credits, so you should be okay depending on where you line up, depending on which version you own. You should be okay. Alrighty, so give you the countdown, and away we'll start, and then we'll get right into this. So we got 3, 2, 1, and action. We are playing
TriStar.
Dun, dun. Alrighty, so that's starting. We'd love to ask some questions and kind of pick our guest brain today. So, Taylor, where were you first introduced to Godzilla, and like what got you into him?
It was all kind of right around when 2014 came out, the American one.
Okay.
Which because they filmed it in Canada, in Vancouver, obviously. So I was kind of around for all the buzz from that. Cool. Anyway, around that time, there's a few science fiction conventions in Vancouver that were happening that I don't think do anymore because they were kind of small. They were good, but they were like really small events, right? Anyway, there was this guy named Stan Hyde, and he runs all these Godzilla events, and I kind of ended up going by accident, but he had a Godzilla sing-along.
Oh, no way.
I have no idea what this is. Like, I'm gonna go check it out. And it was like all the all the songs in the Japanese movies. You had like the Jet Jaguar song.
Oh my god.
The Mystery Science Theater version of the Jet Jaguar song. Like any possible song or thing connected with Godzilla that had lyrics.
I'd be so happy.
Yeah, it was pretty much like a karaoke event. Anyway, I went to that a few times and I was like, this guy is so into this that he's made this like karaoke event for these movies. There's got to be something behind this. And then I ended up kind of starting to watch them after that, and then found out he does a lot more events that are serious. Like he has one that's just about the suits and about the suit construction and all the different variations and stuff. And this dude's he's like a retired teacher, and he knows literally every fact you could know. Like he's been to Japan 30 times and seen all the suits in person and all this stuff. Yeah, so he's like this old wise man, and I kind of caught my excitement through him, and then
almost like he was ripped straight out of a Godzilla film.
Exactly. Yeah. He's like one of the Godzilla historians who are in every second movie.
I was just about to say that. I was like Godzilla historian.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, this guy's house is he's got like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these vinyl garage kits of different monsters that he paints. Like it's a it'd be hard to find anybody more devoted to the series.
That's
But
wild.
yeah, so that kind of is where I started learning about it, and then I started going through kind of in the order of whatever seemed interesting, and then it eventually got to
Well, yeah, if you just started from the
beginning to
Showa
end.
series on, you would maybe get turned off depending on what kind of fan
Yeah,
of the
there's
Godzilla films you
some
were,
stuff that's
so,
just like hard to stick with until way later.
until you're officially hooked.
Yeah, exactly. Like Godzilla versus Megalon is my favorite by far, but it took
Yes.
a long time to get to that point because it's objectively one of the worst, but
Yeah,
in the
the
meta
cheapest
of
for sure.
in the meta of the whole series, it kind of becomes its own thing.
That's cool. You know what? That just honestly, that's super cool that you're kind of experienced Godzilla later in life, because a lot of people who are diehard fans and like it as much as that you do, like a lot of it stems from being shadowed of being a child. So like it all just seems cooler than it actually is, and a lot of it's nostalgia. So huge respect goes out to actually finding it later in life and still finding the respect and the passion to love these films, because honestly, like I feel like if I didn't grow up with Godzilla, I wouldn't be as into it as I am today. So that just is wild to me, and I actually love that these movies moved you and had you intrigued enough to actually get into it later in life with all these newer, better movies and like other franchises that are out. That it still pulls you back into like the old Showa series movies as well. Like that's awesome, especially that you're able to appreciate Godzilla versus Megalon.
Yeah, I definitely can understand it. It's one of those things that, like Power Rangers or Super Sentai, Ultraman, that kind of stuff. I was never
Yeah.
super into those, but I know people who were into it when they were younger love it. And Godzilla is kind of an in between where it's not as hard to get into, but like if you're just watching the late North American, like the 2014
like the MonsterVerse legendary films.
that universe onward, it's really hard to go back and connect anything to the old ones because they're so different.
Exactly. But it's almost like they wouldn't be there if it wasn't for these other films, right? And
yeah, exactly. Like if I had started out there, I don't think I'd be so interested in going and watching all the other ones. But
yeah. So just to dive into the film where we're watching at, folks, for those who are watching along, I love the intro to this one because, like a lot of the Heisei movies, they tend to. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the director of the last couple, but he's actually doing the writing. So Kazuki Omori directed Biollante and King Ghidorah, and he kind of got knocked down to writing, and it was kind of his choice to do the writing on this movie instead of the directing, and they brought in Akawara. But the cool thing about these ones, in the Heisei series especially, no matter who's directing, they always try and pull from some kind of North American film that was also popular in Japan at the time, because not because they want to copy it, but because they were fans of those films. So like, Ghidorah, we had a lot of Back to the Future and Terminator references. Biollante had a lot to do with like biotechnology, which was a very popular point of interest, especially for developing countries. And it had kind of like the success of Little Shop of Horrors to kind of pull from, which that was more of like the get up to actually think they'll make money again. But as we saw the intro, kind of with him stealing the artifact, very Raiders
Indiana
of the Lost
Jones?
Ark.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, see, I'm just
Very
watching the
Indiana
movie
Jones.
still.
Well, good.
Yeah,
I hope so.
I think a lot of people don't realize that. People kind of look at the whole series as like, it's Japanese pride and joy. It's their like number one film franchise, and they love it and they really respect it and want to advertise it as this big thing. But it's only been that way recently. I'd say like 2010 and before, it was kind of just like, what's going to make the most money. After the first movie, it was how do we make money from kids and make toys for kids. You kind of lose that in translation just seeing the movies now. But yeah, pretty much everyone came out of the first was, what's a good way to make the most money out of this movie at this time for this audience, which leads to a lot of them having those connections to different movies, like you were saying.
Yeah, and I know it. I think it had I think there was less of a backlash on it and more of a love for it too when these films, because a lot of these Heisei films didn't come out in North America until the late 90s when they actually got official releases through Sony TriStar. years later. This being one of them. Like, this film didn't hit US market till 98, but it was filmed in 92 and released in Japan in 92. So by the time these movies hit, all those movies it kind of took from in inspiration because of the love for it, like Aliens, as we'll see in the future, like Back to the Future, all those movies and Indiana Jones have become cult classics, and we're on their like third or fourth film by then. So going and watching these movies, it's almost not like, oh, they just copied it because it was popular at the time, because to North America, those movies were getting a little older. So if anything, it almost felt like an homage and like a really nice throwback to their movies. So it's almost like it helped them get into it a little more, maybe for like the Godzilla viewer that wasn't so into the Godzilla quirky stereotyped kind of characters. You know, like you have the reporter, you have the scientist, you have the military man. So it had something for them to cling on to that was similar to their culture and to their film history. I know Josh isn't a fan of the love stories.
Did anyone notice that this man just ate a lemon with the peel on?
With the peel, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
I've never seen that in my entire life. I was just like, what the fuck just happened?
He's hard as fuck, yo. You don't care. I do like we'll see the story kind of unfold a little more with these two, but I love how most of these films follow a romance of these couple that are like into each other or something. They've fallen in love because they're intertwined. And Josh kind of gets a little annoyed with it. Even I do, especially in the later Showa films. But this one I love, and we'll see it because this man here and this woman were actually families and they had a kid, but they're now divorced. So you almost get this kind of like, they're separated, but there's still maybe some magic there, and they constantly bicker, and it adds a really cool element, I think, to this one that actually helps carry the story a lot more. And this film, like without spoiling too much for Josh, it is very much a Mothra film. As Taylor, I'm sure you could agree that Godzilla is very much an afterthought in this film, but respectably, he kind of fits in. They did a kind of a good job. The only character I think in this film who really feels sidetracked in this one, like kind of like not necessary, is Miki's character, Miki Sagusa, coming back. I feel like this is the one film in the Heisei series where she doesn't really feel relevant, which is a shame because I really love Miki Sagusa as a character in the Heisei. It's the first character we get in the Godzilla films that carries from film to film, and they didn't just change the name of the character and keep the same actress. Like, she carries a continuity through the Heisei, and I'm sure as well that's why a lot of people love the Heisei series as well, because they do kind of all intertwine rather than them having a continuity but not really addressing the other films as they go. Well, this one very much addresses film after film, so I really like that.
That's probably been the hardest thing in introducing my girlfriend to the series, is explaining how some of the movies are sequels but some of them aren't, and then some are sequels to earlier movies that ignore a few in the middle. Yeah, and that like the timeline is absolutely absurd. I think it almost splitting off at points where the same thing is happening in one movie and they have two different outcomes, and that becomes two different sequels.
Yeah, that happens a lot in the Millennium series. We'll get to that. That's where it really, because I'm pretty sure this one, I mean, 1984 kind of feels like a separate movie, but that's because it technically was before they decided to really build off it. But in the Millennium series, yeah, like they retcon everything except for the first Godzilla, and almost every film I believe in the Millennium series, other than the two, Tokyo SOS and the other Mecha Godzilla, they just ignore everything and just pretend like the first one happened, then this one, then the first one, then this one, and it just, you're jumping back and forth so much. So I feel like if you watch the Millennium series, you should watch them spaced out and not back to back. Like these ones, back to back for sure, as we were saying. But I feel like the Millennium, they hop all over the place.
Yeah, it's a mess. Although I don't think it affects the quality. It's just you got to be able to accept the fact that exactly, accept the fact that there's so much.
Now, one thing Josh always seemed to not like to, and I kind of agree with him in most cases, and until it comes into the later films, the Mothra larvae is very ugly. It just looks like a giant poop, and that's how he's always viewed it, right, Josh?
It is.
However, in this film, we kind of get another larvae, as we kind of saw in the water scene there, and I feel like Josh is really gonna like the design of this larvae and almost bring a newfound respect for the larvae form, because Mothra's is a little silly, but also she, blossoms into a moth-like creature. Like, she's supposed to have this iconic beauty, and I like the fact that her larvae form is kind of, lack of a better term, ugly and a little like deformed, because when she grows, it just shows that she can grow into something beautiful and be the protector. I like the metaphorism of Mothra kind of blossoming into something that's this grand protector and so powerful and so beautiful from this ugly thing that's weak. And it goes for our next, our kind of, I wouldn't say our antagonist. I mean, he's kind of an antagonist, the monster, but like in all these Godzilla films, in the Heisei series, Godzilla is the antagonist. And that's, me and Josh were talking about, that's one of the reasons he loves these ones, is because Godzilla is the bad guy he's meant to be.
I just demand more moth, less worm. Is that too much to
Yeah.
ask for?
And you know what? You'll probably get it with a little this one, but the worm larvae, like whatever you want to call it, it's the stuff in this movie that they use with it is actually interesting. And a lot of it has to do with our third character that gets introduced that we saw. It does make it a little more bearable.
Like, I know Taylor has the Mothra tattoo, right? So in the end, you aren't going to get the larva form tattooed on you. It'll look like a giant turd.
Yeah, I think I would skip on that. Yeah.
See, you choose the good version.
But, I mean, there's a purpose to it. Like a lot of the monsters don't look good necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But I personally don't think the larvae are the worst. I think that King Caesar's pretty horrible.
I just feel like they focus too much on the larva compared to the actual moth form. Like a lot of the movies we've watched thus far that have had Mothra in it, it's like 3/4 larva, and then we get like 5 minutes of the moth. And it's like, why even add the moth then? I want more moth, maybe a little bit larva, and I'll be completely content.
Like we talked about. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, I was gonna say, I think that's the biggest thing that's difficult with these movies going into watch them for the first time, is that they're not really, none of them are really just monsters fighting, except for Final Wars. Everything else is just a lot of exposition, a lot of weird stuff, a lot of stories that aren't really necessarily
fast forward
good.
To the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of, I think a lot of people go in expecting, it's giant monsters fighting because of kind of all the stereotypes and kind of cliches that have come from the series. But
yeah, and when me and Josh talk about that, that's one of the things we mentioned. We feel like, because of, like, I know memes had a huge role in it, but when people think Godzilla, they talk about the good parts, which is like the destruction, the monster fights, and I feel like Godzilla as a character is more known by word of mouth than media. So when people expect to go watch these films, they're expecting this grand destruction of monsters, but that's literally just the buildup till the end, and then people forget there's all this quirkiness in between. So you're almost like, wait, this is a Godzilla film? Mm-hmm. This is what this is like.
I just hate when they spend so long on the buildup for very little reward.
Just to cut to the movie here, I love how when they cross this rickety bridge they're walking across, and they're like, is this going to be safe? And he's like, he's like, oh, well, together we only weigh like 100 and so kilos, we should be fine. And as soon as they start walking across, of course the bridge breaks. And I love how they're afraid to jump, yet it's like 5 feet off the water, but I feel like they're more afraid to jump because they don't know where the river will take them, and the fact that they're going to get soaked and they're kind of stuck on this island. But this looks fun. Like, we noticed the one I always laugh at is the third guy that jumps off. He smiles as he jumps, like he's enjoying it.
Yeah.
Not to mention the water is super clear and not dirty from the last shot. But
yeah, that scene in Mac and Me when the kid flies off the cliff in a wheelchair? It's a similar kind of accident here happening.
And I like the fact too that this one has a little bit of comedy thrown in, that it's like nonchalant comedy. Like, it's supposed to be like, like the kids would be like whatever, but the parents would be like, haha, I feel you. Like, especially with the ex-wife and husband bickering the whole time. I also got to point out, I know Josh may not recognize him too much, but definitely for people who've watched future films, I always say feature instead of future. We're just going to ignore that. Our one guy there who's in the suit while he's hiking, which is already funny to begin with. So his name, you had it memorized and I instantly forgot. Takehiro Murata. So he plays in the future, he plays really big roles. So for a lot of people, Godzilla 2000, because that was the first Godzilla film, I think, besides the original, to hit theaters in North America and really have a grand release through Sony. He's the main role, as we'll see, in Godzilla 2000, and he's been in a ton of other Godzilla films. Like, I think it flows back to he's in future ones, like he's in Destroya, I believe he makes a small cameo in GMK, and he does some like little spitter spatter, but this was the first one I believe he was in. Yep, 1992. So this was the first movie he was in Godzilla wise, but we do see him reoccur, and he actually works his way up to become a main lead. He's our lead character in Godzilla 2000, which is the birth of the Millennium series. So it's really cool to watch him kind of be the snarky, businessman who doesn't belong, to him being the leader that we follow and the guy we love in future films. So it just shows his acting chops. And I honestly never like noticed how good he was until watching the future films and then coming back and rewatching this and being like, yo, he plays a good role as like the businessman who just wants his money. Like he does a good job. I like that. Because a lot of the times when the actors in these films, they go from movie to movie, they're either dramatically different and do it bad, one's better than the other, or they play the same character in every movie. Like Akiko Hirata, who was our eye patch man in the original and was pretty much in all of the Showa films on and off. And then he did his final role in Terror of Mechagodzilla before passing away, before he could be in 1984. He was the only other actor I think that I really appreciated jumping from role to role. We do get one more character who is, I know his last name's Takarada, Akira Takarada, who played Ogata in the first Gojira film, and he's been in tons of Godzilla films. Like I know he's even in this one at some point. He's another actor who really differs from jumping to person, but I feel like those are like the big three that I'll always remember watching these movies that have appeared in multiple ones. I do love Miki though. Miki Sagusa is probably my favorite. I know a lot of people don't like how she's included. Like Taylor, what do you think about Miki Sagusa in the Heisei series? Do you like her addition as being like a reoccurring character to connect everything, or do you find it a bit stale?
Is she because I'm bad with names, is she the one that plays a scientist's daughter and then immediately plays a scientist's daughter again, but it's a different scientist in the
She's
next
the
movie?
Psychic. So she's the psychic.
The psychic.
Yeah. And she made her first appearance in Biollante.
Yeah. I think she's good. I think she's fine. I kind of always look at every single thing as an individual piece. I think that like if you're not watching it with any continuity, just in a random order, like not connecting it to anything else, sort of.
Oh, here we get another Indiana Jones type light into power something. Oh God, sorry to to cut you off. That's so funny.
Yeah, I just kind of, I've always looked at everything completely, even with reoccurring characters or actors. I look at everything as an individual thing because I find that when I do kind of put things in an order or any continuity or connect them to other movies, it makes me enjoy certain things less. I had to kind of look at everything as its own mindless thing in a vacuum,
And I feel like with the Heisei series, I had to do that because obviously, like we were saying, these didn't get released like they did in Japan. So these all kind of came out sporadically. Some got rights to get brought over first and others, etc. Like I think the first Heisei Godzilla film I watched was 1984, which I know isn't during the Heisei time period, but it's included with the Heisei films. And the other one I watched was this movie. And then I saw Godzilla versus Destroyer, and it wasn't until years later that I got to see Mechagodzilla 2, and which we'll get to. And I only recently, earlier this year maybe, got to see Godzilla versus Biollante, because that film is a bitch to get your hands on. And because it's such a, I wouldn't say it's definitely well loved, but it's not well talked about, at least for like before Godzilla started blowing up again. So I never heard of that as a kid growing up. So like that was a really cool movie to watch. I thought, seeing a Godzilla movie I didn't see when I was a kid was going to be like, oh, it's not the same as the other ones because I don't have that nostalgia trip. But God, I loved Biollante. That is a great film.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best looking movie in the whole series. They're
absolutely,
because it's only a one. It seems like there's always a trend where when a character only shows up once, it sort of gets forgotten to time. Like Biollante and
King Shizar.
Yeah, and the crab dude, Abraya.
Oh, yeah,
whatever his name is, the crab guy. And then there's Hedora, even like the things that kind of show up.
I hope Hedora comes back for future films. So
yeah,
good.
Hedora is the only one that's
Josh feels very indifferent about that.
About Hedora. or
Yeah, I know Hedorah. Yeah, Josh doesn't like Hedorah. Hedorah's the sludge monster, Josh, in case you forget.
Oh, the weird UFO looking thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can't say that because there's another weird UFO looking creature we'll get in the future. So
yeah, which is another one that's totally forgotten, but actually pretty cool.
So greatly appreciated though. Like it got into like Orga was the character. It won't ruin too much talking about just the name, and it appears in video games, and not to mention like the graphic novels and the manga that came out attached to these films. That's the one thing I liked about Heisei and the Millennium series is they started adapting mangas to the films to kind of fill in the backstories a little bit. Incredibly hard to get your hands on, but if you dig, you can find the synopsis in some of the books. But like I was telling Josh, the last film we watched, Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, they kind of changed Ghidorah's origin, obviously, as you know, and they talk about the Gorats and how they fused the three together because of radiation on the island and all that, and they said that they created these creatures. But then when you read the manga, you find out that they took a dead Dorat from one of the planets in space, and they found its skeletal system, and they took its DNA and rebuilt it from scratch. And then like that's kind of, so it still has its outer space origin a little bit without it just being a man-made creation. Because when they view it, they just talk about it being a man-made creation, and it kind of ruins the whole outer god, destroyer of planets Ghidorah feel. And I'm like, they should have put that in there. It could have been just an easy line, but I guess they were a little worried about, I know the writer at the time and the designer didn't want Ghidorah to be from space. He thought that was stupid. Like, okay, well then some people from the future having three creatures they form together isn't weirder than that. That's so funny. So we get introduced here to the Cosmos. I mean, they're the Shobijin, but they're called the Cosmos now is kind of the name they get. Same idea though, the fairies. But the reason they call them the Cosmos, as we'll dig into the story here, is because I think they said, I could be wrong, they said 12,000 years ago, I believe was the year date. They the Cosmos pretty much ruled the world, and obviously they like mentioned to Mothra and all that, but the kind of filler back that they don't really dive into too much in the film is that the Cosmos kind of tried to develop a weather control system, a way to control the weather, which homage to Son of Godzilla, Josh's least favorite Godzilla film. When they try to control the weather, I thought that was a nice little throwback. But because of that, essentially the Cosmos were punished with this deity that was the opposite of Mothra, essentially. And that's kind of who we were getting introduced at the beginning, and we'll see more play out for their kind of character and role as it goes on. But flashing over to talking about Hedorah, like Taylor was saying, how like it can relate so much to today. I feel like this one also, like a lot of the Heisei ones can relate a lot to today too, because they're talking about preserving nature, preserving the order of life, essentially what a lot of the legendary films are trying to nail the coffin. And you know what I mean? With we're kind of just here and the world owns us, you know what I mean? And we have to stop thinking of it that way. And then you get stinky businessmen like these guys here who pull all that shit. This is very much a cookie cutter. I often think this film is, they took the original Mothra versus Godzilla idea, the greedy businessman with a giant egg trying to take the money for it, but they just throw a Heisei series skin on it. They have more, better effects, beam battles, kind of a quirky romance that isn't too in your face. Like it's a Heisei skinned Mothra versus Godzilla, and that's why it's called Godzilla versus Mothra in Japan. So it makes sense.
Yeah, this one kind of feels like a you know how sometimes when they do in the Marvel universe, they'll make a movie just so they can make a sequel later on with that character in it.
Oh yeah.
It almost feels like they did that with this, and then did the Rebirth of Mothra trilogy a few years later, which was like just for kids essentially.
Which I'm glad they did separately.
Yeah, it's those are weird movies, but it's almost like they did this so that they could kind of bring Mothra back to the public consciousness, and then market it to kids again.
Which I think was a good shot, especially right now, because I believe at this point in time, Gamera either was starting or finishing their Heisei kind of era, and Gamera was doing great in the Heisei era. Like the earlier Showa Gamera films were always viewed as, Godzilla's copycat for kids, and it was kind of meh, which Godzilla even ended up shifting to kind of compete with, getting a kid audience. But I feel like when Gamera hit the Heisei series, they were really starting to do their own thing, and they were truly at that moment a threat to the Godzilla franchise, where they're like, yeah, these movies are good, they're getting better, so much so that a lot of the directors and special effects artists from those films come back to do future Godzilla films, which is cool because I'm glad they didn't get so much in like a Street Fighter better than Tekken kind of versus idealism.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that they're both be able to be loved by kaiju fans and loved as their own separate things, because they very much are their own separate things. If you boil them down, yes, giant monster terrorizing the world, sometimes in their favor, does good things, and that's nice. But they are very different feels when you watch them. Oh, so here we're getting the first shot of the larvae of the opposite of Mothra here. So we'll give out the name now. So its name is Batra, which I thought was really interesting, because it's not really a bat, but
yeah, it's the Waluigi of the Godzilla universe.
Exactly. That's so funny. It is the Waluigi. That's funny. I never thought of it that way. It's totally accurate though. But Josh, what do you think of the design of this one? Looks a lot better than the poop, eh?
Yeah, so far. Sorry, I'm just like vibing with this movie.
It's good.
Miniature work.
I was gonna say, I will say, the set design in this one is really good, but I feel like the miniature work did take kind of a shot. I feel like it's better than Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. I feel like the budget was not utilized the best for the special effects department in that movie, especially, I mean, it's hard coming off of Biollante because that was like the best, as Taylor was saying earlier, that is the best special effects Heisei era. I would say even best special effects period, because as you get into the Millennium era, they still use practical, but they do rely heavily on CGI and trying to incorporate that into the films, which makes sense because a lot of people were starting to feel like they were cheap because they weren't doing CGI, because CGI was the climb in the industry during the 2000s. And I get that, but I mean, their practical work is amazing. Why shy away from something that's so good and so real? So, but I do love, I love the larvae, and who's piloting this. It's actually not a puppet, the Batra larvae. The other Mothra larvae is still a puppet in this one, but we actually have an actor inside the Batra one because it does a lot of movement and lifting up. And it is actually, I believe it's our same suit actor who played King Ghidorah in the last one. Hurricane Ryu Hurricane. Yeah. So he's the same guy who did Ghidorah's suit acting in the last one, and he's coming back to play the larva. And as always, our one and only love of all time, Kenpachiro Satsuma, is playing Godzilla again. Like in every Heisei movie, he plays Godzilla, so it's no surprise to the diehard fans. I know this is a really tough question to ask, but I got to ask you, Taylor, who's your favorite Godzilla suit actor? Between Kenpachiro, who does Heisei, and Nakajima, who did Showa?
I mean, it's a hard comparison. It's kind of like, it's sort of like comparing the visual of the series as well, because the old ones, the Showa era looks like guys in suits doing stuff. This era looks kind of like more of like
horror movie
creatures and monsters. Yeah. But I think that the Showa series was great just because it's become obviously a pop culture kind of cliche thing, all the goofy looking movements and stuff, but I think that's like it's almost like the more archaic stuff was very defining for the series,
and it was more hands-on too.
Yeah, they wouldn't have really gotten to any of this, and then later on the Millennium series without all of that trial and error for 17 movies, however many it was.
15 with just the main titles.
15.
Jesus. I will say one thing. I love the Showa series for their hands-on fighting. I know a lot of people call the Versus Heisei series just beam battle central because they were just bigger suits, more intense creatures. So it was harder to get more hands-on. And obviously, being my personal favorite, Nakajima, I love Nakajima as a suit actor because he was able to be so daring and hands-on. As his performance, I prefer Nakajima in the Showa era. But as a respect for the profession, I definitely love Kenpachiro Satsuma for that, just because of all the behind the scenes hardships he went through being injured and all of the negatives he was brought, but still came back to do what he loved. And
oh yeah,
so
the
I
farther
feel
you
like
go
I
back,
respect him more, but I like Nakajima.
yeah, the farther you go back, the more grueling and disgusting all that work was. I heard from the Stan Hyde, who I was telling you about. He has tried on a few of the suits, and apparently they just like reek, like they smell so bad.
Oh,
so whenever they would
yeah.
recycle parts and use different things, it was like still damp 15 years later, and like
Just a
super
concoction of
disgusting.
different stenches.
Yeah. Whereas as you got later, they replaced things more often, but back then it was like they had to scrap whatever they could and use it again, and on a lower budget. So everything was as heavy and disgusting as possible every time.
Yeah, I remember seeing the original Goji suit that was used in 54, not in real life, but I remember seeing the articles about its kind of final days, that it was finally deteriorated enough that it had to be put away because even visually it had to be like kind of sustained in like a certain case with like degrees and humidity just to kind of keep it bearable. And I saw the pictures of what it looked like, and it's just decaying around the edges, and it was so sad. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, the suit's like 50 years old, so I mean, and it was lit on fire and soaking wet, and not to mention it was the first suit they made, so they couldn't have had it down to a science by then. So I know it had its issues, but it's just sad to see such an iconic suit go down. Like watching the soldier you've watched all through these like war movies have his last battle, like that's what it felt like. It was so emotional. So coming into the movie at this part here, obviously the meteorite that they thought was essentially that they thought it was some kind of just regular asteroid, turns out to be Batra, and that was the larva, but it had awakened our big G. And I kind of like how too it's just Godzilla versus Mothra. So the first battle we get is Godzilla and Mothra, even though there's a lot of other elements that play into the story. Just sticking with that original battle, I'm sure fans who are coming to see this got really excited at this moment. I would love to go to one of the festivals they do and watch all these on a big screen again, because watching them on VR on my big screen is just not the same. I'd like to have the full theater experience and all that jazz. The suit in this one's really cool, and I gotta talk about the suits real quick. I don't know how much you guys know about the behind the scenes of the suit drama on this film, but
Nope.
the Godzilla suit that's being used here for a lot of the water scenes was the suit used from Biollante and King Ghidorah. So, but there was another suit made for this, because during the production of this film, coming up to filming, one of the suits they made for this film for the dry scenes was actually stolen off the lot. And it was actually missing, and it was like almost like a ransom kind of moment, and they were looking all over for it, and it got news headlines all over the world. And at that point, I didn't think the people who stole it realized it would get so much attention, so they kind of ditched it in a nearby forest in Japan, and some poor lady just found it in a bamboo field and almost she had a heart attack because she just saw this creature in the bamboo field, and it was the Godzilla suit. But really, they had to build a whole nother suit, so they ended up having two suits to play with in this film, more than they would have before prior, because they had to, bank on whether that suit, maybe if it wasn't found, they had to have something to use, right?
Yeah, I can't imagine it's easy to not even
sell it.
Yeah, not even in regards to how much heat would be on it, but the fact that it's like a 200-pound enormous thing.
Oh,
like,
yeah, true, good point.
Have the storage for it.
I want to know how they got it off the lot unnoticed. It must have been an inside job for sure, or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just got careless and left because I know in Japan it's not as security heavy down there, because it's kind of a more peaceful country when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I figured that maybe they just had like light security, and someone from North America was over there and took advantage. You never know, or if it was someone from the area, or maybe an employee who was wronged. Let's see a movie about that. The mystery of the stolen Godzilla suit. Have like Mystery Inc. come in with Scooby-Doo and try and solve the case. That's a
They could
sequel
probably
I wanna
do.
see.
They could probably do 24 documentaries about specific incidents from behind the scenes in these movies. Like there's so much weird stuff that's gone on over the years.
Just wacky shit. I feel like Ken Pachiro has like the best stories to tell. And he have you ever had the chance to go to a G Fest?
No.
So G-Fest is done in Illinois, and they often have a lot of actors who come from Japan and actors who lived in Japan who were now over in North America. And Nakajima used to make appearances all the time until he got sick and passed away in 2017. I think his last one was 2015 or 2014 to kind of coincide with the release of the legendary film. But Ken Pachiro is still a regular visitor. Same with Miki Sugusa's actress. So I would love to go to meet Ken Pachiro Satsuma, just because I'd like to hear all the stories he has about, because, you know, he had in Hedora, when he played Hedora, he was like, he had the appendicitis and had to get surgery while he was in the suit, and his painkillers didn't work. And then you have like the scarring on his feet from the missiles in 84, and he's got scars galore. He got knocked out underwater. I would just love to hear like his full stories on that, not just brief, little hits. Because like the stories that man could tell that we even haven't heard would be so cool. I still love this Godzilla suit design for the main fact that the lights light up on his dorsal fins, which is another Ken Pachiro incident. When they first lit them up, it electrocuted him. So that guy's been through hell. Notice how aggressive. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do enjoy this larva compared to the other ones.
Better,
like this is a little better,
and she's more aggressive.
Not as spaced out in the body, so I feel like it's not as round. It's kind of like looks like sections.
And fighting in water helps hide a lot of the lumpy slowness, right? Because she can move swifter in the water.
Just better version.
Because they're in one of them giant Toho tubs right now, So now we get the third antagonist. Now we get this triple threat on the way. So obviously Batra was the evil deity that the Cosmos were talking about that essentially was made to punish them for trying to change their ways, which is why Mothra is so innocent and the Cosmos have such positivity, and why they're so well disciplined. I would say like they're trusted with the future and the nature's order, because they had the threat of this character. Like, look how big it is compared to the Mothra larvae there. Just yeets Mothra over.
You could tell too if you've seen the 3 Gamera movies from this era, that Batra, I think of all the Godzilla characters, looks like it definitely was trying to cash in on the edgy kind of Gamera thing they had going on.
Yeah,
so those are always
like
more
Legion looking.
Yeah, those are always like a bit more dark and kind of brutal, and the style of Batra is extremely different than any other character in this series.
I like that shot too when Batra goes underwater and you can see the lights of it powering up under the water, like it's shining through. That's a wild shot. Like shots that maybe, on paper don't seem like they would think about, but like while they were filming, they were like, oh, it'd be really cool if we had like the light shine up through the water to like almost see its eyes swimming through the water, like some kind of marine life. I'm like, that's a cool idea. Like you don't think about that before filming, but I wonder if like those were ideas they came up with while just filming on the go. I still feel, we shit on the Showa era a lot for, its outdatedness because it's just an older film, but the underwater scenes in Ebra Horror of the Deep are still better than these shots. I don't know who was in charge of, was Ebra Subaraya? I'm gonna have to check real quick, because the underwater special effects in that movie for like the 10-15 seconds we got it was some of the best, and like it compares to a film 30 some odd years later. See, so he carries that corporate greed character kind of from the last ones. Like, yeah, exactly. What's he gonna do with Mothra? Well, last time they just kidnapped the Shobijin, so they're not stupid enough to do that again, right? Lol. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Josh, what do you think of this one so far, bud?
I like it.
Yeah, you digging it?
The enemy dude looks like a Power Rangers villain.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. Ripped straight out of that. I gotta talk about it too. I know we've been talking about it on the podcast, like we were gonna get to it eventually. So folks, I have received my copy of Zone Fighter, so we will definitely be covering Zone Fighter on upcoming podcasts as well. Taylor, have you ever seen anything about Zone Fighter?
I don't think so.
So Zone Fighter is Toho's attempt to capitalize on television series like Ultraman and Super Sentai Kamen Rider. So what they had done was essentially it's literally a cookie cutter Ultraman. So it's these family of 3, and they're called the Zone family. And essentially these creatures called I'm going to butcher their name because I just started watching the series. They're called like the Gorgons or Gorgons. And they pretty much send aliens down every episode. And it was a TV show. And then it's like almost like Ultra Q, where like there's some human drama and they kidnap people. And then it just becomes a monster fight at the end where they grow big and then they have like a full on fight. And the guy's just like Ultraman, but like they call him Zone Fighter. But the cool thing about it is it's all Toho owned. So we get appearances from Gigan, Godzilla, King Ghidorah, and it's actually continuity with the Showa film. So right before Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, but after Gigan, that's kind of when it's supposed to take place in the continuity. And it never got a North American release. It never got subtitled. So they're really hard to find. Luckily, I found a copy, and the person has been kind enough to actually have outside support to get people to subtitle them. So we've actually got subtitled versions of them, and goddamn, they're just extra as hell, and I love them. So I can't wait till we cover that series because it's super funny. Definitely recommend it though if you're willing to seek out the films. For anyone watching, Zone Fighter is definitely worth it. It's just if you like Ultraman and you like Godzilla, you gotta see Zone Fighter. So now we got, kind of all that disasters went down. So obviously now we have Mothra's eggs hatched, Mothra's loose, Batra's encountered them, Godzilla's out there as well, being like, what you doing in my waters, boy? And we got pretty much the 3-way takedown. So now we have all these monsters loose, but they think they're all safe now because, they're like, well, the egg's gone, monsters are doing their thing. It's like, what do we got to worry about? Well, a drunk alcoholic businessman is all it takes to fuck up a good story. And we're about to experience that firsthand. A really cool fact, I know me and Josh talked about it when we were talking about like who we'd love to see direct a Godzilla film, and we were talking about Tim Burton because he was such a big Godzilla fan. He was actually in Japan and visited the set on the first day of special effects filming for this film, and like was a stand-in and actually got to experience the film be made for its first day of special effects. That just shows cool. How big of a fan he was. He went to be there day one. I would have loved to been on the set of this movie. I mean, nowadays it's like, everything's like, if you've seen the behind the scenes for the legendary films, even Shin Godzilla, like Godzilla Resurgence, a lot of the special effects were CGI'd, and a lot of it was like suitmation and then edited afterwards with CGI and other special effects. But I would have loved to been on set, where you can literally walk through the town and see everything and like have a full actual practical set. Dreams, my friend, dreams. I would love to be on. Even the Heisei series is gorgeous, but I would love to be on the set of a Showa set. I know there's a few museums in Japan where they have like pieces from, I want to say it's one of the later Showa films. I wish it was Godzilla versus Gigan. I wish it was the Godzilla theme park. That would be legendary. I think it's from Destroy All Monsters. They have the Monster Island set. A few mountains and a few pieces of it still intact, and you can go see it, but you can't like walk through it or anything. But they still have some of the practical effects in museums and whatnot. I know there's pieces of the Heisei buildings you can get if you go to the original house from Gojira that's still there. It's like a Godzilla museum kind of attraction. You can go visit and you can actually buy pieces of the props. I think that's really cool. Like it's just slivers and little broken pieces from the buildings, but they were taken off sets of all of the Heisei films, which I think is wild. I would love to have that as a collection piece. As well, like most of these Godzilla films, the official final result we got has nothing to do with the original pitch that it was. Like this was originally a concept movie for Mothra versus Bagan, which I mean, he's a character who's been, I think it's Bagon is the other one that it gets confused with. Bagon is like a character that's been in developmental hell and been pinged to so many movies and never used. I think he was used in Super Godzilla, the video game, once, and that was the only love he ever got outside of maybe comic material and mangas. But essentially, Bagan was supposed to be like a Gigamoth-esque thing, and then Mechanicon was supposed to come back. and they were going to shrink down one of the scientists to go inside Godzilla and shut him down, like some kind of and like Osmosis Jones type shit. And the more I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that's stupid. But then the more I think about it, I'm like, that would have been awesome. Shrink down microscopic size and like go inside Godzilla and shut him down like a nuclear reactor. That shit would have been wild.
They pretty much covered every other kind of way to try and go at him. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they came back to that at some point.
Yeah, I mean, there's and I bet like the reason maybe they shied away from that idea was in one of the earlier Showa Gamera films, they do a similar thing. I think it's Gamera versus Virus, where they go inside Gamera inside this like submarine thing, the two kids, and then they go inside to try and destroy the virus from inside Gamera. So like maybe they're like, we don't want to get judged or like feel too related to that film, considering it was one of the less successful Gamera films. Maybe that had something to do with it, but I think it would have been a cool, nice little touch. Mm-hmm. It's almost crazy enough. It's something we might see in future legendary Godzilla films, something along those lines.
Yeah, the Legendary series kind of gone off the rails.
Yeah, I feel like Toho's just taken their rights back. I know that they're talking about doing a TV series, whether it be through Netflix or HBO, following Kong and his journey in the Hollow Earth. And I'm pretty sure Toho's retracted their rights again, so because they're working on a Godzilla film as we speak, which I'm super excited about. And I'm like, why not with all the hype? I mean, I think it would be really cool because it would, again, bring over a lot of fans who have, seen the 2014 and King of the Monsters and Godzilla versus Kong, Skull Island, etc., who maybe didn't have the, the friendship base or the social aspect or the want like you did to get into the other films. When these people just see these ones and like, oh, they're great, and that's it. I feel like Toho coming back and having a North American released Godzilla film of their own would really blow through the market and maybe push people to experience these as well.
Oh yeah, because I think Shin Godzilla to a big extent did that.
Yeah, exactly. Like that film did all right, but again, it could have been more adapted for North American audiences. I definitely feel that it was a very much a political piece, really talking about like the tsunami and the earthquake, reactor meltdown, and kind of and their military and government's slow response time, and they were really trying to get with that, which was, I mean, the original idea of the first Gojira is kind of aimed at that and like the dangers of nuclear weaponry. And so I get what they were going for, but North American audiences, I mean, lack of a better term, don't give a fuck about that.
Yeah, exactly.
They want to see like an interesting out there story, if anything, and then the monster action. So I feel like that trying to bleed such a serious note with such a over the top monster concept is something that's very out of character for North American moviegoers. It's either got to be batshit crazy or just super intense. There's none of this overlapping seriousness with batshit craziness. It's just hard to get people to latch on. But I mean, I really like Shin Godzilla. A lot of people don't like it. I liked what they did with it, and I definitely love the suit design, what he ends up being. I mean, Josh has seen that version of Godzilla. I know he really dug it, and I feel like I agree with him. Like, it's the scariest looking Godzilla we've ever gotten.
For sure.
He seems like a threat.
That movie has some of the darkest scenes too. The most like for how kind of campy it is and comedic and satirical. It's got like some really, really grim scenes in it as well.
Oh yeah, which I mean just flashes back to the original again. Like I feel like when they were doing Shin Godzilla, they sat down, they watched Gojira 54, and then they watched 1984 Godzilla, and then they made the movie, because it very much pulls a lot from those movies, especially like a lot of the board house meeting scenes, and when they're like talking in the boardrooms, like that pulls a lot from 84. And then the overall fear and what Godzilla is represented as pulls a lot from Gojira, and how like very much like Jaws, he's not shown a lot, but when he's shown on screen, it's like, oh, impactful. Well, like they tried to do that with the 2014 Legendary films, but it was more like, show his great scenes and then cut it right before the fights. But they didn't build him up to be this, all destroyer in 2014. They kind of made him out to be the good guy right from the beginning. So when he did show up, you just wanted to see him kick ass, but then they pulled that kind of cutaway to kind of, hold off on the appearance. But it's like, well, no. You got to make us scared of him to pull that. You can't just pull that when we want to see him. But I still like 2014. It's still like up there. I really enjoyed it. I feel like there's a lot it could have done differently. And I'm sure we'll get to it when we hit that movie for sure. And if you're down, I mean, we'd love to have you again if that's the one film you'd be interested in being a part of as well. Because 2014 being like one of your true introductory, like when you started really getting into Godzilla, it'd be kind of cool to have that angle as well.
Yeah, it's I didn't really love 2014, but it kind of kickstarted everything else for me.
Yeah,
because I had seen before that, the only Japanese movie I had seen was Godzilla 2000. I never saw 1998 when it came out.
Lucky you.
Yeah, but I heard everyone talking shit for so long that I never thought about watching it. And then when Godzilla 2000 came out, I think they released it 1 year later in North America. I assumed, okay, this is going to be cool. This is like the Godzilla movies everyone loves so much, and they're so mad about the 1998 one, that this is going to be really great. And then I watched it and I didn't really like it because it's the style of the movie is so established at that point that it's weird to just hop in at that one to start viewing all the old movies. But then, so yeah, it must have been right after that I didn't watch another one until 2014, and then I went back again.
I gotta point out to you, I'm calling it now, folks. Mark your calendars. Josh is gonna love 98 Godzilla.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good movie. Not as a Godzilla movie, for sure. It's a pretty good movie as like a dinosaur rampage movie, but it's just not a good movie as a Godzilla movie.
Yeah, well, even Emmerich, when he was, doing that movie, he was like, I don't want to do a Godzilla movie. Then why the fuck are you making a Godzilla movie?
Yeah.
Like, he just wanted to make another big action film because he just came off the high of Independence Day, and he's like, oh, I want more. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that Independence Day was such a huge hit and it was an original concept, and then to follow that up, they were like, let's take a old concept and redo that, and it obviously flopped. But maybe if they just stuck with that original idea thing, they could have continued the momentum.
Like 98 was a huge film to me because, so just to shed a little bit of history, I know I'm probably tired of hearing my history about Godzilla, but I had a family member who was like a huge collector of these films. Like, he ordered them from Japan before they were available, and he watched them all the time. And once in a while I'd be at their house because I'd go and visit my aunt and my cousin, and he'd be there, and he owned these movies and he would watch them, and I fell in love. I thought they were the coolest looking things, but I could never bring them home because he's not going to let, some kid handle this imported movie. He had to contact some guy in Japan to go buy it at the video store and then mail it to him in the mail, because this was like the late 90s, right? No one fucking could just order it off Amazon or something. So I mean, he would never let me have them, so I had to watch what I had. And at the time, all I had was the 98 Godzilla. I had Godzilla King of the Monsters, but I was a kid and black and white was really hard for me to dive into when I had all these other movies, and eventually I got others, but 98 was really the only film I had that I could watch at home at that time that my parents were able to get their hands on. And it wasn't until I wore out that videotape after a month that my family took me down to my video store and I was able to find Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla and Godzilla versus Megalon from the Showa era on VHS. And then I lived and breathed those growing up, and they were my favorite thing. So 98 has a good spot in my heart of being like that one film I could watch, but even watching it as a kid, I'm like, this isn't a Japanese Godzilla film. I feel like if that film would have been just a remake of The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, it would have been a much more appropriate. Like, if you've seen that movie, it definitely feels more like that film than anything, from the look and the feel and everything. I love, see this shot right here where Mothra is on fire. Such a badass shot. We never really get to see Mothra be really destructive other than like the first Mothra film. And I love seeing her just wreck shit. Because like Josh said, it's just a giant turd rolling through the city, just lighting everything on fire. It's just badass. You think this little thing can't do anything, and then you see her destroy, and like, no, she's a force to be reckoned with, man. You piss Mothra off, you don't want to be on the wrong side of that girl. She'll mess you up. Oh, here we go. Miki Sugusa just kind of thrown in to keep her character relevant. I love the display of all the Godzilla toys they always have kind of sitting around the sets. Like, that's a 1984 Godzilla figurine for sure. You can tell by the spines on the back. I love that they gave Mothra the blue eyes. I think that's such a because, you know, like having her be such a blank black, like flat color scale, like it's just kind of like a lot of darker shades, just not a lot of pop, and then have her blossom into that big moth. I find it a little bit contradictory. Like you have to have something that kind of hints at like what she's going to become. Like even caterpillars and other like moths, they look similar to what they're going to hatch out of. And I think the blue eyes give it kind of more of this mystical fantasy element to her. Like she's not just a creature, like there's some kind of magic behind her. And I really enjoy the blue eyes a lot. I think it adds a lot of more character to her overall monster design. A little less silly, I think is what I'm going for there. It makes it a little less silly, which on paper, it seems like maybe putting color in her eyes would make it more silly, but I think it really works in this film, especially with Batra being so colorful.
Yeah, when they try and give more exposition on in things like that, that's when the movies tend to stand out. Those are the ones that kind of stand the test of time and hold up for people.
So here's a rough scene a lot, actually. So the dad finally meets his daughter that he wasn't allowed to see. And she walks in at the worst time because he's currently kidnapping essentially the cosmos. Like he wants to sing the Shobijin. So we almost get this thing where they're like, you know what you're doing the wrong thing. And it's the connection between him and his daughter that kind of turns everything around. I think it's a nice touch. But really, I mean, he's out there to do the right thing. Like he's trying to save them. But yeah, see, even the kid knows better. We haven't had a kid in a Godzilla movie in a while too. They kind of steered away from that. But I guess with again at this time, you know, having Mothra in the film being one of the highest loved by female audiences in Japan at the time, of course, the no-brainer would be have kids in as well because they're going to attract that kind of audience. They might as well. And I think in this film it works because you have it almost creates the tie between these two characters more strong. Like you constantly see them fall in and out of love and like try and repair their relationship, but then see that it's maybe not the right thing to do. You never really know how their story is going to end. So I know the human elements in these movies aren't always the most important thing, but when they are done right, it really adds a good layer to the film that kind of helps the pace keep going without it being too slow. Like nothing's worse than like, you know, a great example is Destroy All Monsters. The plot going forward is really bland. You don't even know a lot of the characters' names. And it's not until the ending with the grand fight scene, you can tell they just really baited on just that ending fight scene selling the movie because the rest of the story is just cookie cutter and really lackluster, other than our awesome suicide jumping out the window guy. That's a great scene. But they just whip a dummy out the window and there's no cuts. They just follow it all the way down.
I'm okay with it. It made me laugh.
I always love when they do people inside the building as destruction's happening. I feel like we don't get that enough in these movies. We get them a little more in the Heisei series, but like, just give me more of this. If you're going to have humans feel the human drama, like this is the human drama of being a person in your city as it's being destroyed. And this is like firsthand how you experience it. Like, I know Josh, you haven't seen it, but like a good example is in 2014 when the smoke kind of comes and they're inside the building and all of a sudden the smoke fills up the entire room they're in. And like, it just makes it that much like, oh my God, because you wouldn't be able to breathe, see, and you're just trapped. You don't know if you're going to get crushed at any moment. Like that kind of fear of like natural disaster, but it being controlled by an uncontrollable and unpredictable force is really the scary part of being a human in these movies. Not so much of like some monster destroying your home, but being involved in the destruction itself.
Oh, I've said it before. These fuckers should have left Japan.
Yeah.
Like long ass time.
Josh is the one who moves out of Japan. I'm the one who moves into it. This is the only shot I think of the Shobijin, or sorry, I said Shobijin again, the Cosmos, where it doesn't hold up that well because they're trying to composite in two moving elements. But the rest of the shots, I feel like the Cosmos were done the best in this one, for sure. I mean, there's the three versions of them really in my mind. You get the Showa era ones, the Peanuts, who are the group who sung together and did all that. And then you get these two girls here as well, who are a lot more showboaty about it. They went on TV and did a lot of performances. And then you get the Millennium era Shobijin as well. I feel like these are my favorite of the twins. And I do love this Mothra song the most. As iconic as the original is, I feel like this one picks up the speed a little bit. Like it raises the tempo just by a bit. And it makes it a little more uplifting and better, in my opinion. But these are definitely my favorite Shobijin for sure. Taylor, what do you think of these twins? Do you like them better than the Showa ones, or do you have a preference?
I think I like Millennium the most, and it's only because of Tokyo SOS. Because for whatever reason, that movie is my favorite. I've seen it the most, and it stuck with me the most. Um, and they're really heavily featured in that one.
I feel like Tokyo SOS has the longest time rating for monster fights too. Like it has the longest and most monster fights on screen.
Yeah, I think so. It's got like some really wicked like nighttime fights too. Yeah, but for whatever reason, that one always sticks out.
Oh, and the Mecha
everything
G
else to me.
design is great from that one too.
Yeah.
Kiru is awesome.
It's got like a human story in it that isn't total garbage. You know, some of them are just really bad, but
Yeah.
it's pretty decent. Like it could probably stand on its own without the monsters as a story. Yeah, so I think it pretty much just for that one movie, the Millennium series tends to stick with me.
I feel that. I definitely would say they're my second favorite. I, for some reason, it might be nostalgia talking, but I do really love the cosmos we get in this one.
Mhm.
I feel like just for the fact of it's a little older and the singing was a little off key. I just wasn't a big fan of the Showa era ones.
Yeah.
And two, I feel like they did Mothra the first one, and then when they came back to do the Godzilla films, they were almost like, okay, enough's enough. Like they almost didn't want to do it again. It feels like. But this movie's infamous for one thing, in a bad way, and that's because of the way they depicted the military, like kind of, you know, one firing at Mothra and just not caring for like the surroundings of the cities and destroying stuff. Toho actually got a lot of shit from the Japanese Special Defense Force, and actually told them that future Godzilla films weren't allowed to depict the Japanese Special Defense Force anymore, or the military. Because they didn't like how they were represented. So they stopped having big plots in the movies, and they also weren't allowed to use stock footage like this here. Like these were not allowed to be in future Godzilla movies because of the way it was represented. So that's why after this film, we get G-Force. And the whole idea of G-Force is created in the next film, mainly because they kind of fucked up and they didn't like the way this scene was done, or this movie was done, I should say.
It's kind of a double-edged sword because the G-Force and everything ties in with the Mothra story really well, and it ties in with some of the Millennium movies really well. It became a really big component in a lot of that.
It makes a more believable aspect to bring in Mechagodzilla as well, rather than it just being the military's decision. It's some private organization who specializes in Godzilla. It would make more sense that way. Oh, I love the score in this movie. So as well with this film actually had the most attendance and did the best since King Kong versus Godzilla when it hit theaters, which was the last highest ticket holder. I think it still did better, but this was the closest to that than any other Godzilla film at the time. And people often say as like a joke, well, not as a joke, but as a serious thing, that it was almost like good luck because Ishiro Honda stopped on the set, who was obviously our original creator and director of Godzilla, alongside Tanaka, and he actually stopped in and kind of gave the film his blessing before it was released, and came onto set a little bit before he succumbed to brain cancer and died a year later. So people say that like his spirit and his good tidings were really what made this film successful and made it what it is. So like approaching it from that angle, it's almost like gives us this really emotional, heart heavy. I know with this music playing and me talking about this, I'm gonna start tearing up. Oh, I love Ishiro Honda. But yeah, people say that like a lot of that is like some kind of like, you know, metaphoricism for it doing so well, and him giving the blessing for this film to be made, and that he liked it, considering a lot of the times when films were left in the hands of others, you know, flashback to Hetero when Tanaka walked in on the fish head scene and was like, fuck this, and left.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really cool touch for one of the people to come in and actually be like, yep, I approve of this. Almost like Harada or Eye Patch Man when he was help producing 84 before he passed. Same idea. Yeah, this businessman's way in over his head. Yep. You're crazy. You're a fool, says the man who wants to control a giant freaking 200-foot larvae, I should say. That's interesting. I want to see how big Mothra is in this movie, actually. Let's see. So in larvae form, Her length is 120 meters. Damn.
What about the Batra larvae? Because the Batra larvae looks enormous in this.
Yeah, it looks taller, but it may be a little shorter. Let's see. Batra is 90 meters.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it's a little shorter. But when it's in its other form, it's bigger than Mothra. It's 73 meters when it goes into, while Mothra is 65.
Mm-hmm.
So it's smaller in larvae, but bigger in its second form, which I mean makes sense. It has so many like pointy edges, as we'll see when it hits.
Yeah, I guess it depends on where you measure from, because there's a lot of excess stuff going on.
Yeah, and same deal with their weight. Batra's lighter in its larva form, but when it goes into its next form, it's an extra 10,000 metric tons, coming in at 30,000 metric tons. Oh, damn, that is one big turd. Holy shit. What do you mean it's not fair? You've done all wrong, sir. Yeah, see, he knows what's up. The Earth is getting its revenge. That's exactly what we're expecting, folks.
Yeah, that's one thing in this, watching this franchise, that you can always bet on, is that you're never gonna not know who the bad guy is or who the greedy people are. Like it's very clearly defined in every single one. This person's bad and this person's good.
It's always to do with the mustache.
Yeah, it always is the guy with the facial hair.
Yeah, for sure.
A little bit of a Hitler nod there, maybe. I know, talking about like was it Mothra versus Godzilla, the Showa one, the two guys who are the greedy businessmen both end up kind of being greedy and kill each other. While I like in this one, we kind of see a redemption of the second greedy character being like, no, this isn't right, and he leaves the other guy to die, essentially. You know, I like kind of how we see a redemption story in a turn. So rather than greed turning on itself, we see greed be the waste of time rather than the thing that destroys them both. I like that kind of approach. That's hilarious. So, in some of my facts I've got jotted down here, at the Tokyo Sports Film Awards, obviously in Tokyo, film isn't as huge as it is over here, so they have just like kind of little award ceremonies for, you know, spattered around. It's not just one big one that kind of takes everything. Godzilla and Mothra actually won Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor, respectively, at the Tokyo.
That's great.
So they're fictional characters winning Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor. That's funny. What a world we live in. Can you imagine let's say like Iron Man and Spider-Man winning Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor? Yeah. Like what? That's too funny. Dun, 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 dun. So, and I think a lot of the reasons I love these Heisei films too, and I don't know how you feel about the film, Taylor, but Godzilla versus Destroya is probably my favorite, if not one of my most favorite Godzilla films. And I feel like everything prior to that really builds up to make that film what it is.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like watching these movies, it's almost just like I'm, watching through the seasons just to get to the season finale. Like I'm binge watching a TV show, and then like that's the ultimate payoff. So like it kind of makes me want to just get through all of them just to get to that moment.
Not to give too much away of that one, but this whole, like, from Godzilla 1984 to then is like stylistically the most similar kind of movies, but it all plays, even though they're not necessarily related in continuity, it all plays like a episodic franchise, with that being like the 84 is like the big return, and then Destroy is like the big finale,
the big send off. Yeah. To this day, I mean, besides 98, when I was a kid, I probably cried a little bit at the end of that one, but to this day, I will still bawl my eyes out at the end of Godzilla versus Destroya, man. It's with the music and how it ends, it just gets me every time. I love it.
Yeah, that was a huge thing in Japan too. Like it was like a huge cultural milestone.
Yeah. It was a cool kind of send off. Again, I don't want to spoil too much, but it was like letting go almost of the idealism that they had to create Godzilla for as well. So it's like, yeah. We're just tiptoeing on eggshells around Josh here.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, buds.
No matter how much you spoil, it's not really going to ruin everything. But there's just there's a handful of moments throughout the series that are just so cool that like they that you kind of had to see them.
Yeah, I still want to see him get the super soaker in the eye feel still. I want to see him ball his eyes out. We might have to watch that one in person so I can turn and get a picture of Josh crying. Like a lot of the films, I know it'll be a meme you watch. A lot of the monsters always they either tune roars or like adjust roars, but with Batra they kind of got lazy. Batra's roar is literally just Rodan's from the Showa series. So I'm like, I like it, and obviously in the Heisei series we haven't seen Rodan yet, so it's almost like not too bad that they're reusing it, but I notice it and it bothers me.
Yeah, I'm sure sometimes they change it.
Yeah. And I get that, these movies, let alone sometimes they reuse things from film to film. And, this time, I mean, in the Showa series, especially, you would only see the movie in a year and it wouldn't go to video because they only just released in cinemas back then, especially with the earlier films. So if you waited a whole year, you wouldn't really notice when they reuse stock footage or when they cut something here and retell something the same way here, because it's been a whole year since you've been able to watch that film at the very least. So it's usually not too bad. But once you have them like we do with our collections and you're watching them back to back at like a full day, you really start to see all the little copy overs and the little things here.
Yeah, the repeated scenes that happen.
The glorious all monsters attack.
Yeah.
Oh, God. This is probably my favorite Mothra transformation. I think there's something really beautiful about this one. I feel like the one in believe it's Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. Is that when she appears in that one? There's one of them. I don't think it's Tokyo SOS because SOS she's already in there. Yeah. But that one probably looks the best. But I feel like this one emotionally hits you the most, just because of the music and everyone gathering around to watch it happen. When moments ago it was all about trying to kill it and whether it was going to be this grand thing because it destroyed everything. But you get Mothra coming out and then the Cosmos kind of being there to usher in her new form. I find it really beautiful.
Now this practical effect glitter.
Yeah. And the fact that the antennas and the face pincers actually move on this puppet they have for this scene. Because I know in the show
that set was a nightmare.
Yeah. We're like, oh, it's so gorgeous. It's so beautiful, Josh. That looks like a lot of work.
That's all I was saying. I was like, man, like shop vacs for days, just sitting there like glitter, glitter, glitter.
I'm gonna say it right now. One of my downsides about this film is the stiffness of the stiffness of the puppets and the flying puppets. And I know it was like that in the Showa series too. But like as Taylor said, like SOS is a really good film. And I feel like one of that has to do with Mothra's design, because in the Mothra they do in that film, rather than just having the wings pull up and then fall down, they had strings on the top and the bottom of the wings, so they could pull the wings up and then yank them down quickly to give more flap, they more flap than just move up and down. So it actually looks like her wings are actually making her fly and doing damage. So I feel like SOS does the most fan service to Mothra, hands down.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So as much as the Rebirth of Mothra films are like their own thing, they do dramatically change the design and kind of mess with the story in a little ways that I'm not the biggest fan of, but they're still great kaiju films. But yeah, Tokyo SOS is ultimate fan service to Mothra. I'd be really happy if Legendary, maybe Toho would let them do it. If Toho takes their Godzilla rights back, maybe they'll let Legendary do a Mothra standalone film. I think that would be really cool if they did it right.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
In my mind, I feel like that's what they would do next. Oh, here we get Batra's transformation. Batra just gets to skip the whole cocoon phase.
That thing's lit.
Yeah, this is a really cool design.
It's pretty funny that they spent all this time on Mothra transforming, and then this transformation takes like 5 seconds and isn't dramatic
Ultra badass. Yeah. No, I wonder if that was because I don't think it was a budgetary reason, but maybe just to kind of keep the time of the film down.
Yeah.
Maybe and the fact that Mothra was this grand thing, like she's getting ready and preparing, and then as soon as she comes up, Batra's like, okay, kill mode. You know what I mean? So maybe it makes it seem more aggressive. But maybe I'm just giving the film more credit where it's due and just making up false reasons like I tend to do with these movies. The Godzilla goggles blind me from the reality of filmmaking.
Yeah, it's definitely it's probably one of the most one of the franchises people feel the need to maybe like justify or fight for or make excuses for over any others.
Yeah.
Like, while there are a bunch of great movies, there's 9 movies in between each great one that you have to kind of justify the reasons why it's good.
Yeah. I mean, and without a doubt, without it's not spoiling anything, I wonder if you feel the same way. The true like black sheep of the Heisei series that's like not really loved or well received is Godzilla versus Space Godzilla.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because it is such a cool concept and the plot's good, but it's really a special effects and director problem, I think, with that movie. Because it still carries the continuity. Like we get returning reasons from other movies and characters who have maybe passed or had something to do in old films that really affect what's going on in that movie.
Yeah.
And I feel like they had good things going with it, but just bad payoff.
Yeah, it's once again, it looks cool, but it's not like, it doesn't really hit hard.
It doesn't hit home the same way, especially coming off of, and it's funny because it gets sandwiched between 2 tough films. Like it's sandwiched between Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2 and Godzilla versus Destroya. Like, how do you compete with those 2 movies?
Yeah.
Like, you just get sandwiched in. It's like a reverse Oreo.
I've always felt like it should have been more connected to Destroya. Just like, it seemed to me like it goes hand in hand with Destroya, but it's so different. There isn't really any connection, you know?
Exactly. And I believe it's Space Godzilla. Like they tried to do more with Miki Sagusa in that one and really give her more of a role. And I wonder if that was kind of to build her up to be what she is in Destroya.
Yeah.
To maybe have her that kind of effectiveness. Oh, here we go. I do love this ending. This is what a lot of people remember about this movie is the set and the whole kind of ending battle that we're getting here. Because like most Godzilla movies, we're hitting the last 20 minutes right now. Yeah, so this is when shit gets good. That's not a well-aged shot. But interesting enough, this whole set piece was used in a lot of films. A lot of the same shots even were used. So Quentin Tarantino, big Godzilla fan, if y'all didn't know. And in the scenes in Kill Bill, I think it's Kill Bill Volume 2, when she's going to get her revenge on Lucy Liu's character, they're flying over what's supposed to be, I think they mean for it to be like Tokyo or Hong Kong, and that's kind of like the angle they're going for, and they use this footage for it, the exact same footage and set for all those scenes. Like, you might as well if it's already built.
Yeah, it's good too because it looks different. Like you can tell that the film grain, there's something about the film isn't Kill Bill.
Yeah.
So it kind of forces people to be like, why is that so different? And
Quentin Tarantino loves having those little off plays and little differences in his films to make them more, different and unique. I love how they're just ramming each other. Like that makes sense for Batra to ram Mothra, but what is Mothra ramming that sharp, pointy edged motherfucker gonna do? She's just trying her best at this point, I feel like. Because Batra's got laser eyes and shit that shoots out of his horn. So yeah, all these composited shots don't look the greatest. This one looks all right. But I feel like, you look at Godzilla versus Biollante, and they say the reason that one looks so good is because it's at night. Well, like, what's this film's excuse? You know what I mean? Just in some shots, it's just really rough. But then again, the special effects director who did Biollante, like he was known for his matte lining, like being able to hide green screen marks and stuff. That was what his special effects was really known for. I'm just going to go and I wonder if it is the same special effects director. I believe it was. So I want to know what's going on there. Let me just check real quickly here. So our special effects director for Biollante was Kawakita. I'm pretty sure he does this one. Yeah, Kawakita does this one as well. So I wonder if it was maybe just having to do with flying creatures because they move a lot more and it wasn't grounded and they had camera shake. If it was harder to hide the compository lines or what his deal was there. Because or maybe he had like lost love for the project. I want to know what his angle was there.
At this point in the movie, you've kind of forgotten that Godzilla is in this, and then all of a sudden he shows up at the very end again.
Yeah, which honestly I kind of like a lot.
Yeah.
It gives you more of a reason to focus on Mothra and Batra. And I like it too, because Mothra is, like the good one, and Batra is supposed to be the bad guy, right? And Batra comes in to mess stuff up, and then Godzilla's like, "Oh no, bitch! I'm the destroyer here. I'm the bad guy. Don't you try and take my spot." Like almost he's gotta like throw his dick on the table and prove himself. You know what I mean? I love it. And it makes Godzilla feel even more like the bad guy, but also he's kind of like the hero. But if you look at it like the sense he's protecting them, that's not really the case. It's more like, hey, you're messing shit up. That's my job. Now I'm going to kick your ass. Nobody beats the bad guy.
Razor Ramon?
Yeah, exactly. So Kawakita, though, he did this one obviously in Biollante and Ghidorah, and he does all of them up until Destroya. He also did the Rebirth of Mothra movies. So he's got good films under his belt. And even like, I mean, all of the films have their hit and misses. Like for Godzilla versus Destroya being as amazing as it was, it also has some kind of missteps. And I wonder if, him doing Godzilla versus Biollante and doing such a good job and it not doing well almost lost his passion for doing the film. So that's why he starts to kind of slack going forward. I know people use the excuse in King Ghidorah that it was in daytime, so that's why it was harder to do a lot of the effects. But I have a feeling that maybe he just lacked the passion after being let down from Biollante, which makes no sense why that movie didn't do well. To this day, I still don't understand it. It must have been a promotion issue on Toho's front, because it's a great film. And I know it uses a monster that wasn't popular, but I mean, 1984, people still went out and saw that. Well, that would be a grand return. I don't know.
I don't really get why Biollante wasn't that popular either, because it's I think by far the coolest look designer of anything in the franchise. Like
I'd
it's
have
just
to agree on that one.
Big, like flat out of the ground, menacing thing.
Like if Orga is as popular as it is, why wasn't Biollante?
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel like maybe because like North American audiences love the idea of like a creature using Godzilla cells and being like evolved into this crazy being and shit. And maybe that's why, because Godzilla 2000 had a wide North American release and that's what it was aimed at. And Biollante was definitely not, being the only film distributed by Miramax. So I wonder if maybe that's why, because it just wasn't popular in North America. So it didn't have that push.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing too, which seems kind of dumb, but I think definitely plays into it, is that Biollante didn't really have a lot of toys back in the day. Like there's been stuff since then, as of more recent. But when the movie came out around that time, exactly. I mean, there's a few things now, but when the movie came out, there were some vinyl toys, but you couldn't really make a toy that really made sense and kids would want to play with, because it was a stationary, like half underwater thing.
Yeah.
And if you look on like Japanese auction sites, you don't really see many different toys from back then of it. I think it was just a hard monster to market,
I see that now.
The popularity wasn't like, it's not like Mothra could sell toys easy or Godzilla could sell toys easy. And such a big part of it was the kids that were driving it, So if the kids aren't going to be able to buy a toy out of it, it's not really worthwhile.
A lot of their profit came from selling toys. That totally makes sense.
Oh yeah. Same thing with
crack the egg.
The same way that He-Man and Ninja Turtles and Transformers were all made just to sell toys, and they would have so many different characters coming in constantly so they could make new toys and sell those toys. It just similar parallel with this series, except that the times when they couldn't really make toys or didn't really have good designs that would translate well to toys, those tend to be the ones that don't really hit as hard. Yeah,
that makes sense too, because I remember there being lots of Godzilla toys for these movies and in North America that you could buy, but these movies weren't out yet. Like I remember there being like a Mecha King Ghidorah toy, and there was like a Batra toy and all this stuff, and I'm like, and then Rodan, but I'm like, it doesn't look like Rodan though. And I remember being so confused, and like Mecha Ghidorah is cool, but like what fucking movie is it in? Because it wasn't
there were a lot of lot of play sets too, these little play sets that had like battle scenes from these movies, and they were trying to market it as like a movie tie-in, but there wasn't a movie to tie it in with, unfortunately.
Yeah, that totally makes a lot of sense now.
That being said, the Godzilla 1998 had crazy marketing and a crazy amount of toys that were super popular.
I own them
they
all.
Had like,
unfortunately,
yeah, they had huge toys in the whole Baby Godzilla line, and there's like so many different scales and stuff.
Four different skins of the same toy, and people bought them. So
yeah, like that did amazing for marketing. But like, and kids watching that movie, I'm sure thought it was really awesome. But kids watching that and then going and seeing this Godzilla, seeing like a instead of like a metallic kind of gray and silver blue Godzilla, seeing this green lumpy Godzilla,
yeah,
it's not really going to be the toy they want, right?
Oh, you get now I love it when I think this is the first time we really see, I mean, other than I think it happens in Hedorah, but like monsters really use their surroundings as weapons.
Yeah.
This is when the Ferris wheel enters the fight, and this Ferris wheel plays a much bigger role in this fight than most people tend to think. This Ferris wheel makes it not so fair, if you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Definitely this this use of like the sets and the props, that the Ferris wheel specifically, is such a visually kind of impactful thing. I think this is maybe the second best example of this ever, of something outside of the actual characters being like a visual, outside of the monsters being like a big visual thing for the film. The only one I think being more iconic is in Gamera 3, when they fight in the big glass, not to get too much away, they fight in that big glass building. That's kind of renowned as one of the greatest scenes in a kaiju movie ever.
Yeah,
just because
I agree.
of the set and everything is so insane. And this is a very similar kind of vibe, the Ferris wheel.
You see the little the cages on the Ferris wheel, they move as he carries it too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's just so much attention to detail in these designs. Boom, just trucks Godzilla over the Ferris wheel. We have a big Ferris wheel close by in our fellowing town of Niagara Falls, and every time I see that Ferris wheel, I think of this movie and this scene, and I'm just like, yo, if Godzilla was here, I'd push that motherfucker right into this bitch. Boom, and then I give him a giant smooch on the lips. Just a flashback to like that iconic Heisei Godzilla roar. You know what I'm talking about. Every time Godzilla roars, they do that bottom left pan up to the left side of the face, and he roars and tilts to the right, then the left to show off his teeth. They've done it in every shot since Biollante, and they continue to do it. And I don't care how many times they reuse that shot and I see it, it gives me chills every time. I love this Godzilla suit design, and especially this being like the suit they used in this ending fight for those two movies. It just looks older and more beaten down, so it looks like he's been put through the ringer more. Like, oh, I just love it. Just so goddamn good. And a lot of pieces from this suit were repurposed for Godzilla versus Destroya. I think they make another Heisei suit for the next two films. And then in Destroya, they bring back a lot of pieces from this suit and remake a new suit. Especially with the face. You can see it a lot in the face.
Yeah, this is like I was saying earlier, that these are the most like visually interesting movies. Like that's a big part of it, is that this is the most Godzilla-like design. Like if you go back and even watch the first movie, it doesn't look like Godzilla as most people think about him, even though that's the classic, iconic first one.
Yeah.
But this specifically, where he has this sort of just the body shape of this one and the profile of it is what people associate with Godzilla.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the one thing I do like about the Millennium Godzilla, especially like in 2000, is the fact that they made him green and really kind of like started to lean more into the green tones. I wasn't the biggest fan of the huge dorsal fin spikes. I found that it made him more hunched looking and kind of made him more animalistic, which I mean is exactly what they were going for, and I like it. But I like the Heisei design because he still holds that mushroom cloud kind of look with the thick thighs and the thin top. But I do like how they incorporated a higher contrast of green in the suit. And then they take it out when I think after Megaguirus getting into like Tokyo SOS, they make it more black charcoal gray again.
Yeah.
And I like the kind of idea that the reason they did that is that, he's been war torn over the years after, being what happened between him and Orga in 2000. And then what happens in the other films coming after it really wears him down and beats him to like the color and the shape he's in those movies. My favorite Godzilla design would still have to be, as much as I love the Heisei design, GMK probably has my favorite suit design of all time. I just love the hunch posture and the white eyes.
Yeah,
there's something about that suit that's just menacing.
That's one of the kind of fan favorites all over. That's a really crazy looking one, especially compared to the other Millennium movies. Which he's very like streamlined and thin and agile, almost like he's got like that thin jaw and like a thin snout, and kind of small arms, and he's just kind of, even with the dorsals being spiky, like it's a very thin, kind of agile looking thing, and that kind of goes back to the beefy looking design.
I love how Godzilla's just gnawing on his face there in that scene. Nom 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 nom. He's eating him like a freaking chicken wing, and then you get the blood squirting all over him, the yellow slime from Batra. God damn, that's a wild shot.
Dun, 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 dun.
You can do it, Mothra. See, I do like how even though Mothra and Batra were like the villain, like hero and villain, they end up coming together to stop Godzilla. I think that's like a real nice touch, a little turntable of what we weren't expecting. Oh, and there's a little shot of Mickey again just to make her relevant.
Yeah, that's kind of the big point in a lot of the movies, is waiting to see who is the bad guy and who's the good guy, or if it's just one monster, or the basic idea is, I imagine when they go to write a movie, is okay, is Godzilla going to be good or bad, or just walking through the city and he happens to be breaking things, so it's an inconvenience, but he's not actually malicious. Like that kind of starting point is kind of, I think, how they get every one of these things going.
I love the idea, like thinking about behind the scenes, like those wires are holding up all that weight. Can you imagine how much all three of those suits weigh together? Unbelievable. And obviously there was no one in the suit for this scene. That Godzilla suit's empty. You can tell because it's stiff. I wonder if for that shot I doubt they had another like smaller version of them, just because that's way too much money to spend on.
For one
shot. So I do think they're just the bigger versions, but obviously these shots are shot different because when it pans back, they aren't bleeding and it doesn't show that on Godzilla. It's a little bit of a continuity error, but it is what it is. It's there though. It's funny though, because if you take Batra out of the loop there, it kind of just looks like Godzilla had a rough night and threw up all over himself. Ate a bad taco, And when Batra's eyes go out there, like almost like Batra's dying because of the blood loss. Boom. I like when they drop them in there, the pulse they do, the little visual effect they do there to make it really seem more impactful, like they truly are that massive and big, and not just a couple toys.
Trying to make it seem more that they've defeated him as opposed to just dropping him in some water, because he can swim. Like there's no, it's aquatic. Yeah. It's not really a death. He's just in the water now somewhere else.
Yeah, which is funny. I mean, flashing back to Godzilla raids again when they bury him in ice. I'm like, what? Like you're gonna drown him in ice? Like he breathes underwater, right? Oh, it's just so silly sometimes. I like this shot of Mothra just lying across the airfield.
Godzilla just falls in the water and then it's fine. Like he's just gone.
That's the one thing I do have about this ending is it's really good build up and then it's kind of just the ending just kind of happens.
Yeah.
It's the only like that, and the stiff moth movement is the only thing I really have to complain about this film. Everything else I really do love and enjoy. It's one of the better Heisei films, but as we all know, it's definitely not the best. I feel like this one is tied in just with Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. Like it's kind of in that same kind of middle ground, better than it could be, but not quite what it could be. That being said, we'll do the amazing love but hated Rotten Tomatoes segment of the episode. So Josh first, guessing. Josh, what do you think the Rotten Tomatoes score is for the critic rating on this bad boy?
36.
Oh, okay, we're going low.
Jeez.
Yeah, right.
Well, every time I guess, I'm always wrong. So now I'm just picking random numbers.
I mean, you're picking Showa numbers. These are the Heisei films. They're a little higher.
All right.
Take a second guess.
62.
All right, that's a good guess. What do you think, Taylor?
Yeah, I'm gonna say somewhere in the low 60s for sure.
So this film has a surprising 75%.
That's probably the closest I've gotten yet. So.
I know. I'm proud of you. But after this, besides Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, I'd assume, I don't know what that one actually is. They only go up from here in ratings, though. Because I know the next one we'll watch, Godzilla versus Mecha 2. That one is widely loved and a very good film. Like it's a pretty solid film. I don't know if you know this. We've talked about it before on the podcast, but what we're building up to is Godzilla versus Destroya, and that film has a very surprising, perfect 100% certified fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about, because it must be that there must be some bias there, because outside of the Godzilla fandom, the appeal isn't as huge as I think that that number would lead you to believe. But
yeah, it's hard to talk about without spoiling too, and the idea of it. But like I feel like because of what happens at that movie, it was such a world-changing event. Like it was so echoed across the world because of what it does in the movie. I feel like maybe because of what it does, maybe that's why it's so widely appreciated. Yeah. Just because it probably had the most news coverage out of any Godzilla film.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I do find it funny that that's the send-off for the 1998 film to get created, like almost like they're passing of the baton to the States. And then they did 98 and they're like, oh, we're taking that back now.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how it happened too, was that when they, after 98, they were like, okay, that was the only reason they did the Millennium series, was because it was so badly received. They kind of didn't want to tarnish the name, and then they just kind of kept going with it for a while.
Yeah.
The setup they have now is they're not allowed to release a movie in Japan the same year as a legendary one comes out.
Yeah. Which makes sense. They don't want to overcrowd the market, and they all get their chance to shine without shadowing or overshadowing.
That's why the 3 anime movies came out, and that's why the Singular Point, which is coming out later in the month.
Oh baby, 4 more days.
Yeah, that's why those happen, is because they can still do that, right? And that kind of is appeasing the Japanese fans, which is good. They're still doing, because Shin Godzilla was great, and then to do that and then have nothing come afterwards would be a bit of a bummer, and have it just be these big Hollywood action blockbusters and not the more like spiritual successor Godzilla movies.
Exactly. And I feel like King of the Monsters, the legendary one, did really well because Michael Dougherty had such a love and passion for the originals that he incorporated so much of the lore and like the idealism into the movie. And Bear McCreary doing the score, like that's probably one of my favorite movie scores. I know it's biased because I'm a Godzilla fan, but that guy just does killer movie scores and composition. Just unbelievable. An important note. So the film's ended. Sorry, folks. The important thing to take away from the ending of that film is Mothra has kind of exchanged her cells and absorbed Godzilla. That's what she kind of did at the water over top at the end there. And then she flies out into space. Between that and Biollante kind of doing a similar thing at the end, that's just something important to keep in mind for when we get to the next 2 films, because it does kind of play into the role of what happens.
Definitely the dumbest origin story. Kind of most absurd story for a character development.
Dumbest character development for one of the coolest designs.
Yeah,
it's just wasted.
Yeah, and then when you get to Destroy, it comes back down. It kind of gets grounded again in realism.
Yeah, and really, I like how the only thing I can think of to really pull it is if you've seen Spider-Man Far From Home, the latest Spider-Man movie, they almost pull back a character from that movie all the way back to the very first Iron Man. Like they take something that like you didn't know was there the whole time, but it's relevant from the very beginning of a franchise. And I feel like that's what Godzilla versus Destroya does so good is it's, 30, 40 some odd years in the future of the original, but yet they still pull so much like juice and goodness from the original of why we loved it so much. And it makes it perfect for what that movie stands for. Alrighty, folks. Well, that pretty much hit the end of this movie for the time. I don't know, give or take, this is a pretty good Heisei film. Like I said, it's not my favorite, at least by personal choice, but it's definitely top tier Godzilla. Like I feel like I enjoyed this one a lot more than I liked the original Mothra versus Godzilla from the Showa era. Not that I don't like that one, but I do enjoy this one a little more from the side of I wasn't a big fan of how the ending fight was between the two larvae and not Mothra. I think it should have been switched, but I like the Godzilla action more from that one. But like I said, I don't like the two greedy men end up killing each other. I like how this one, there's a little more redemption. There's a little bit more of a personal aspect of it and more of like an elemental feeling to it. But that's literally the only reason I like it better. I feel like I would probably watch the Showa one more, but I do appreciate this one a little more than I like the first incarnation.
Yeah,
this is personal preference though.
This movie for me looks good, but that's all it really has going for it. Yeah, for me personally, it's kind of like it looks good, but nothing else really pulls me in or invests me too much. It's kind of just like other characters that are better in other parts, or other actors that are better in other parts in other Godzilla movies, and then cool visual stuff. It's got like the bits and pieces, but they're not aligned correctly.
Yeah, like the pieces are there, but the puzzle's not fully put together.
Yeah.
Josh, what do you think of this one, man? Where would you place this one? You liked it do you like it better than the last film we watched with King Ghidorah?
No.
Yeah, no, I know. Ghidorah is your favorite, so
I like the Biollante one. That was really good.
Biollante is still probably like the top.
I liked the Mothra in this one.
Yeah,
that was one of the better parts for me. Like I feel like they actually did really well with the design work on the costume.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited to get like to SOS and the Millennium series because honestly, we were talking about. I feel like that's when Mothra's really given her time to shine amongst the other kaiju for sure.
Yeah, that's just it becomes less of like a cool visual, more of like a solid story piece
where she actually fits in, and it's not some kind of either she's the side story or Godzilla or the humans are the side story. Like everything's very well incorporated together.
Yeah.
So that being said, the next film we'll be watching is Godzilla film anyway. Next in the Heisei series will be Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2. So we'll be seeing a return of one of Godzilla's Space Titanium. I wish. I don't think it's made out of space titanium. No, it's not because it's no. We'll get to what he's made out of, and there's actually kind of a cool twist, and it makes the most sense in my mind for this. He's probably my least favorite looking Mechagodzilla design, but I feel like it's the most realistic that makes sense. And when we get into that film, we'll explain a little more why it makes sense compared to just aliens invading with a giant monster or some the Millennium plot makes a little more sense too. But I feel like the Heisei one does the most believable reason why Mechagodzilla could be a thing. But we'll get into that when that film comes to tuition when we work on it next. I just want to take a moment to thank Taylor for joining us on the show today. It's been honestly so cool to have someone else who actually has a background in these films and to be able to kind of pick each other's brains about it. It's been a real blast having you on the show, man. I just wanted to thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it. It's definitely fun to be able to it's really cool having both perspectives of like it being a brand new movie to one person and then it being something that's well established to you. That's
because as much as I do, it's hard to find people who love these movies enough to watch them more than once or twice. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I know, like, it's pulling teeth. I remember going to see the movies in theaters and trying to get my family to watch them as a kid. And I'm like, did you see that? Did you see that? And I'll turn around and they'll be like out of the room and like left 10 minutes ago. Yeah. So it's nice to not have you guys walk out on me.
We have no
choice. The only time Josh walks out is when he goes pee. So
I'm sorry.
Alrighty. That being said, folks, for those who are watching, if you guys have an opinion on this film or fun facts that we didn't mention, please, if you're watching on YouTube, leave below in the comments your opinion and any fun facts you have. or you can tweet us at Killer Kaiju Cast. If you are also a kaiju lover or are looking at getting into these films and don't own them, you are more than welcome to come onto the podcast and join us for a watch through. If it's something you're interested in, you can always, again, comment below, contact us on Twitter, or you can email us directly, which is probably the best way if you're interested on being a guest. And our email is killerkaijupodcast@gmail.com. As well, being the Killer Kaiju podcast, being just killer monsters, we cover all sorts of monster movies as well. Anything from Friday the 13th, which we're working on. We're doing more horror classics as well, and we'll be working into more nostalgic 80s, 90s monster special effects films, such as The Fly and The Thing remakes, which we will be getting to as well. So if that's something that's up your alley, please feel free to stay in contact, subscribe, and stay tuned for future content.
Also, I don't want to forget. Sorry, I'm going to cut you right off. Also, I don't want to forget. Let Taylor plug his little things as well.
Yes, that's okay.
Damn right.
So that being said, where can people contact you at?
So the main thing would be my Instagram, Cult Collectibles, which isn't really relevant whatsoever to movies or Godzilla. I have a Instagram death archive for kind of my DVD collection, which is kind of more of a extreme horror collection more than anything else.
That's the best collection.
Yeah, Cult Collectibles is like kind of my side job, main hobby. It doesn't really connect to anything here aside from
like killer movies. I mean, it will be more relevant in the future because we plan on doing a lot of like the live serial killer documentaries and movies that were adapted for Hollywood as well in the future. So that's something we'd love to have you on the show for then as well, and that would totally dig more into what you do on your Instagram too.
It's my other area of expertise. But yeah, if for whatever reason you're interested in collecting true crime,
they are.
Yeah, they are.
If
they're following Josh by any means too, he'll definitely want to. If you follow Killer Clothing already, you should be following Cult Collectibles as well.
Pretty much.
This is my we got different parts of the market, so
exactly
good simpatico going on.
And if you don't want to, sort it out and look through Instagram to find it, you can on YouTube. We will have all the links to his Instagram profiles below in the comments as well, folks, in the description. So if you want to check that out, it's just one easy click away, and it's all at your palm of your hands. Alrighty, folks. Well, that pretty much wraps up this episode. Thank you so much, as always. We love Godzilla films. We hope that maybe if you haven't watched Godzilla films and you've tuned in, maybe this will be your push to maybe check them out. I swear they're not that bad if you've been told otherwise. If you go in with an open mind, you can enjoy anything. And if you go in with an open mind to these movies, you'll be more than thrilled and enjoyed. Trust and believe. Until next time, guys, have a killer kaiju of a time, and we'll see you next time. See you later, guys.
Bye.